Hey everybody, today I'm doing a video about two related subjects, Jessica Krug and Bombazo culture. I'm warning you already from the get-go. There's a lot of you that are not going to like what I'm going to have to say. And this comes from my experience speaking specifically with a lot of good friends who I respect greatly. Let me start out with that, who I respect greatly. And I respect their cultural practices. I respect their investment in time, investment in a culture that deserves to have people follow it and propose it and grow it. Um, but with all those things said, which I completely hold strong, and I don't denigrate from the get go. I'm saying that from the beginning, so people don't get the wrong idea. There's also other aspects that are completely true, and we should be intellectually honest and accept them. Let me start with the Bombazo thing first, because that's the one thing that I've always had. In fact, in my life as a musician, the only people I've ever had any particular contentious discussions about percussion or music have been not with everybody, with some very particular Bombazo culture activists. And let me explain what I mean by that. That's what I call them. Bombazo culture activists, or let's talk about Bombazo culture. There's been a resurgence in the last 10 to 20 years of people participating in what's called Puerto Rican bomba. It's a Afro Puerto Rican culture. It's Bantu in origin, meaning it comes from the Bantu people from the Congo. It is a tradition of percussion and dancing and singing that exists in Puerto Rico. It's a very communal experience. It's a relationship between not only the auxiliary drummers, the buleadores, but the primary drummer, the primo, who is communicating constantly with the dancer. The dancer does certain movements, and the primo drummer has to follow those movements. So there's a communication between dancer and primo and percussionist, but there's also a communal experience from everybody watching it and people singing the choruses. Sometimes the choruses have meaning, stories. It's a form of, I mean, just like poetry, it's a form of expression for an entire culture. And originally it was Afro Puerto Rican people exclusively, but now that we live in a more diverse, modernized Puerto Rico, a lot of non Afro Puerto Rican people have taken the practice of bombazo. A bombazo is basically a gathering of people playing bomba. They've adopted bombazo as a national expression of Puerto Ricanness, and on a personal level, for them, an expression of their Puerto Ricanness, whether or not they're Afro Puerto Rican. They could be as white as I am, but if there's, in fact, there are some people who are as white as I am who are excellent exponents of bomba and who have dedicated a large part of their life to bomba and who teach bomba, dance bomba, do conferences at universities about bomba, perform bomba in public, use it as a tool for political protest, for example. In fact, I have photos of myself at the Verano 2019 protest in front of the Fortaleza playing bomba. And it was bomba with political messages against the governor. So it's an expression that can gather people together for any type of message. It could be social, it could be economic, it could be political, it could be romantic, it could be in different types. So bomba culture has developed in the last 10, 15 years with people, showing a lot of interest. I don't have a problem with that. My problems with bomba culture are mostly related to the type of people that are coming to it. And by that I mean not everyone, but there is a substantial portion of people who come to bomba from academia. A lot of people who are coming to bomba as a way to rescue or identify with Afro Puerto Ricanness or Africania, African identity. I guess the one of the reasons why it does happen is because it's one of the easiest cultural practices to participate in. If you have, I mean, obviously to become an expert and to know all the patterns, all the 20 different bomba patterns that may exist, most of which are not played. I mean, they exist, but most are not popularly played. If you had to say 95% of the time, it's going to be bomba juba, bomba holandés, bomba sika, maybe bomba cuembe. Those are like the four that I've heard. Rarely, and bomba seis corrido también. Uh, you will not find people. These are five. You will not find a lot Rule. You will not find a lot of Belén. You will not find a lot of the other ones. But the five major ones, and of the five, the most popular one that you see in popular music beyond bomba is Sika, which is sounds something like this. Something like that, okay? Obviamente estoy tocando en una mesa, so it's not the same pattern. It has its pattern, it has its way of tocarlo. There's different sounds, etc. And some slight variations. Some people will slap one hit, on other people will palm a hit. It depends on the region that is played. So there's a lot of context to it. I don't want to denigrate bomba. I'm being very clear about that. But I do believe that there's a lot of people from academia, a lot of Jessica Krug, and that's why I'm going to talk about Jessica Krug at the end. A lot of Jessica Krug type of people who are completely ignorant of music. They have absolutely no musical knowledge. And they approach bomba because it seems to be the most approachable and the most accessible and approachable Afro-Puerto Rican cultural practice. And in fact, it's one of the few Afro-Puerto Rican cultural practices that they can claim as their own, okay? Because beyond the bomba, there's only plena, and plena, even though it has Afro-Puerto Rican heritage, it is also an expression of the mulatto class, meaning the mixed-race experience of native Puerto Ricans on the island. So it wasn't necessarily an Afro-Puerto Rican tradition exclusively, even though obviously it comes from Afro-Puerto Rican heritage. So there's only really two practices from Puerto Rico for Afro-Puerto Ricans to be able to say, I am Puerto Rican and I'm also Africana. So I'm Afro-Puerto Rican. I understand that. There's a lot of interest and desire to identify with that. I think people take it a little crazy and ridiculous. A lot of people who have absolutely no musical knowledge and who come to bomba simply from an intellectual desire to identify as Afro-Puerto Ricans come to bomba and bring with them all their associated traumas, because there's a lot of people. I mean, que no hay una forma de hablarlo nicely. There's a lot of people who come to these type of events with a lot of trauma about the racism they feel, about the sexism they feel if they're women, about the sexual orientation discrimination that they feel if they're LGBT people. And they bring all that baggage to the Bombazo. And then the Bombazo becomes kind of like a progressive, extreme left-wing catharsis explosion of release of anger, release of hatred, identification, manifestation of their soul, of their identity. So they make it a really big part of their life expression, and then it becomes a little ridiculous. And then and I keep claiming it. Not only do they are not only are they not percussively very good. I'm trying to find the words that are possible. So if you hear me stuttering, because I'm trying to find the most intellectual words to express this sentiment, so it doesn't come off as that I just hate bomberos. For the record, I've played with Cepedas, I've played with Ayalas, I've played with a lot of the top bomberos in Puerto Rico. I don't consider myself un folclorista bombero because I don't dedicate myself to the study of it. If I did, I would. I think I'm generally pretty well versed in the patterns, enough to be able to play in any bombazo. But I don't consider myself a dedicated folclorista or a dedicated bombero, let's put it that way. But as a multi-percussionist who plays rumba, plays Afro-Cuban styles, Afro-Dominican styles, bata music, jazz, Afro-American jazz, pop, funk. If you're a multi-percussionist, play everything. I play also classical music, timpanis, vibraphones, things like that. If you're a Puerto Rican, it's almost obligatory that you're gonna have to learn Sika, Juba, Holandés. I mean, if you put your mind to it. Not everybody who's a Puerto Rican knows how to play it. I know a lot of Puerto Rican drummers who have absolutely no idea of how to get into a bombazo or don't know the culture involved in it. They haven't spent any time to it. I have. Pero I'm at least fair enough to the people who dedicate their lives to this to say, yo no soy un folclorista. I'm not a bombazo folclorista. And I've never claimed to be it. I never do that cultural appropriation to say, esto es lo que soy, lo que hago yo toda mi vida. I'm much more of a wide varied musician. And I play todo. You know, I play danza puertorriqueña, I play salsa, I play aguinaldo. You know, toco de todo. I play a little bit of all these different cultures, subcultures, mejor dicho, from the Puerto Rican reality. So there's a lot of people who, because of their traumas and how they're coming to Puerto Rican bomba, the bombazo becomes not just an expression of music, it becomes an expression of their identity and of their rebellion and of their resistance. And they bring together, like I told you, a lot of this baggage here. Entonces, because there's a lot of people who find it accessible, bomba goes beyond the musical aspect of it into this other subculture of grievance. I don't know how the other ways to put it. Subculture of grievances is the best way I could intellectually put it. And there's a lot of space in those subcultural grievances for the Jessica Krugs that exist in the world, or the Rachel Dolezals that exist in the world. There is a very small, extreme minority subculture of intellectual academia, gender studies, Latino studies, African American studies, Africana studies, negritude movement type of people, and those who are intellectual enough to understand what I'm saying know what I'm talking about, because we all know people who are into that, who are the people who are the most black, who are the defenders of blackness, who are the defenders of Taino-ness, who reject their Euro descendancy even though they may have it, and they are completely indigenous African Puerto Ricans, and there's nothing. I mean, I'm being extremely extreme because they are this extreme. Because there are people out there who everything about them is, yo no soy europeo, yo no soy español, español is abused of the Puerto Ricans. I'm totally identifying as my indigenous African culture. And it's mostly women, funny enough. There is some men, but I would say the majority are women in the diaspora. It's also a very diasporic experience. And I believe it happens a lot in diaspora, this ridiculousness. I call it ridiculous because it's ridiculous. This ridiculousness comes from mostly in the diaspora because they are responding to a very clear and present and daily oppressive experience with the white majority, whether it be the white male majority of the women, if they're LGBT, the white male cis, whatever they want to call a male straight majority. So they bring all that baggage to bomba. For those who are percussionists and musicians, we just want to play bomba. But for those people, bomba is not just a cultural expression of music. It's almost an anthropological experience. It is a subculture of grievances, a subculture of resistance, a subculture of many things. That could have positive sides. I don't say that resistance is wrong per se. But there's the reason Jessica Krug, that woman, took bomba or made a bombalera. That should have been the first experience. Real bomberos just say, somos bomberos, tocamos bomba. Nobody ever calls themselves bombalera. The reason they pick bomba as the point to kind of say, look, I'm this way. I'm Afro, I'm Afro Puerto Rican. I'm resisting, otro, is because they correctly identify los bombazos as a focal point of that subculture of academic Afro identity grievances. Some people know how to be able to identify and say, no, yo soy Afro Puerto Riqueña, or I'm Afro Puerto Riqueño, and just leave it at that, and they don't go into extremes. But my experience has been in Puerto Rico, but mostly in the United States, that people who are very strongly linked to this bombazo culture or bombazo subculture engage in that extreme subculture of grievances, subculture of resistance, subculture of Afro identification, to the point where they are ridiculous, where they ignore the fact that they also have European descendants, and many of them are as white as I am, but they think that they're black. And it moves from going to the Jessica Krug situation, it moves from participation in a culture you like into cultural appropriation. There's a fine line between them. For those that don't know, and I think most people who watch my channel know, I'm a babalao. I am very deeply life invested and life linked to a Afro-Cuban and Afro-Caribbean religious practice. I'm also a Afro-Cuban, Afro-Dominican, Afro-Puerto Rican, Afro-Brazilian, Afro-Peruvian, Afro-North American jazz music enthusiast and student and professional. My life is strongly linked to cultural practices that clearly have their roots in Africa. And I openly admit that, openly recognize that. Sería un mentiroso if I don't. But there's a big difference between saying, that I practice those things and saying yo soy afro-puertorriqueño. Or to, if I don't say it, to kind of like play the part that I am more Africano than other people. And that's bullshit. I'm not. Yo soy un boricua del campo de las áreas de Orocovi. My family, most of them come from Orocovis on one side, and the other side comes from Agua Buena. It's campo. And for anybody who studies anthropology or studies demographics or history in Puerto Rico knows that the people who populated the middle of the island, the countryside of the island, like places like Orocovis and Agua Buena, were mostly European criollos. It was the descendants of the first Europeans who arrived to move to the center of the island to live in the countryside. The coastal lines where sugarcane and los cafetales existed is where you're going to find the expressions of Afro-Puerto Ricanness or Afro-Puerto Rican music and art. Porque que ahí vivían los esclavos, because that's where the slaves lived. So how could I, with a clear Orocovis Agua Buena, heritage line, clearly blanco in my skin, claim that I'm soy negro? And that's what Jessica Krug did, and she got away with it precisely because there is a subculture of grievances and a subculture of extreme openness at these bombazos to just include everybody. And that openness breeds that people, both white European descendants from the USA and also Euro descendant Latinos or Euro descendant Puerto Ricans, to engage in a lot of self-confusion or auto-confusion or just expression of of feeling completely enabled, that's the word, to feel themselves something that they're not. I've never, so I think I've spoken enough on that. I think it's ridiculous. And I think as people who participate in bombazos, because once in a while I'm invited and once in a while I'll go, we have to be kind of pretty clear to say, mira, hasta ahí, papi. Like, we have to have enough self-respect to go, contrólate ahí. Bájale dos, papi. Tú no eres Chacazulu. Tú no eres el más negro que los negros. Tú no eres Chango en la tierra. Like, you have to be able to have enough seriousness to say, listen, I play, but I like this culture, or I studied enough of it, pero hasta ahí. And I don't think there's enough reflection in the bombazo circles between those academic focused people. There's not enough self-reflection. There's a lot of permissiveness and a lot of enabling of using the bombazo as a subculture of grievance and a subculture of expression of whatever anger and identity issues one may have. And we need to do a lot of reflecting. That's for everybody to do for themselves. Like, and what am I bringing to the bombazo that has nothing to do with bomba culture? What am I bringing to the bombazo that has nothing to do with me as a primo tocarle a la bailarina? That's it. I'm not here to express that mi papá me dio una pela and now I'm abused of it, and a grandfather me tocó and now I want to express that I'm angry and I'm resisting men because of it. Because there's a lot of that too. A lot of grievance extremist women who are very angry at what was done to them and who just have a chip on the shoulder about hating men in general, even though they may or may not express it publicly. They who do have it, they gravitate to this. I see it all the time. I'm as somebody who's gone to many bombazos, I've seen it. I've actually even seen battles between actual musician bombero. I've been at bombazos where there's been cepeda playing, and there'll be like a white woman or a white Puerto Rican woman academic who will challenge them. I was at a bombazo one time here in the United States where there was this woman who wanted to allow, I don't remember what it was. It was some incident where she wanted to, I remember what it was. She wanted to dance to any drum. There was a primo playing, but she wanted to dance to some other guy who was playing buleador, and she was like, no, tú toca el primo. And el tipo de Cepeda who was there, who was a head charge, one of the top Cepedas, stopped the bombazo and said, cuando aquí hay un primo, se baila este primo. I mean, he was basically establishing, you're not going to come here and adopt or appropriate this culture. The woman that I believe was like half white and half Mexican or something like that, who was an academic too, she grabbed up her skirt, because they come with their own skirts. They come ready to participate in the bombazo subculture of grievance, as I like to call it. She grabbed her skirt and, muffled under, gruffled under her mouth, and talked shit about him and pointed at him from a distance and then just left. So that's what I'm talking about. we have to have enough seriousness, like that Cepeda did, to say, esto es cultura afro-puertorriqueña, nosotros decidimos, and it's about music. Don't bring in your associated crap around. And that happens at some bombazos. At other bombazos, they don't, and I've seen it happen. I also have, I've had this discussion with a lot of friends in Puerto Rico. I've been called an Afro-Cubanized Puerto Rican, Boricua cubanizado, in a denigrating fashion, and in particular with that person, I'm not no longer friends with him because I believe that was insulting, and I've told them about that, but they don't care. It was offensive, and I don't offend people that way. I can have a point of view, pero de ahí a lo que estaba haciendo, that's too much. Pero nada, eh, there's a reason I've said why a lot of people who are not musicians, who have this other baggage and come to the bombazos with something else in mind but the music, gravitate to bomba, and it's because the patterns are very easy. They're usually, I mean, if you wanted to bring, it's not exact, but if you wanted to bring down a sika, it's like 5 hits. One, two, three, four, five, six. It's like six, right? One, two, three, four, five, six. 6 hits, repetitive. Even if I've taught kids the easier patterns this should be an example to everybody. The easiest patterns I used to teach my music students when I was in school and they were 4th, 5th, and 6th graders was bomba. I couldn't ask them to do una rumba. Definitely couldn't ask them to play bata or to play complicated rolls on a redoblante, but they could play this, or even faster, even easier. Juvas were easier for them. And the reason a lot of people gravitate to him is because bomba is generally very easy to play from a percussive point of view. I'm not saying it's easy to dance. I'm not saying it's easy to be a primo. I'm not saying that you don't have to invest time to learn the patterns, learn the subculture, learn the movements and the shoulders moves and the skirt moves, and to learn all the other things that can't be learned from a book that you have to learn at bombazos by participating in culture. I'm not saying that is easy. Tampoco es tan difícil. I'm being clear. No easy. It isn't like I had to spend 20 years of my life to be able to become a master. Okay. You spend a good year, 2, maybe 3, like dedicated performing with bomba practitioners in Puerto Rico, a group that allow you to come in and play with them and you make friends with them, you're going to get pretty good. In a year or 2 time. Tampoco te mata, ¿verdad? That's not totally the reality. I've had this fight with a lot of musician friends who are and mostly bomberos. I've had this talk with a lot of multi-percussionists who play pretty much different things, and they all agree that from a percussive point of view, bomba is very easy. That's it. From a percussive point of view. And I've had this battle with people and they ruffles feathers because people don't want to admit that it's kind of easy to play it. They don't want to. Because it means that if they admit, yeah, it's kind of easy to play, that means that anybody can play it. Therefore, not everybody is really good at it. Or it means they feel like it denigrates their contribution to the practice because, they're not really musicians. Eso le molesta a ellos. They have that internal angst, and it's not even about me. They hate me about it for saying it because I have the courage to say it publicly. But they're just angry at themselves. Que no pueden entonces strut around with, I'm a musician just like anybody else. Yo soy un especialista en la bomba. ¿Entiende? And there's a lot of people who carry that chip on their shoulders. Some people are true specialists. A lot of Cepedas, a lot of the Ayalas, a lot of other people, I don't want to name names, I don't want to get anybody in trouble and esto, pero hay gente que yo conozco y respeto that are very good musicians in bomba. And most of the guys who are really good musicians in bomba and who can hear this and go, I understand where Renee's coming from, are also great specialists in bomba, but they also play guitar, they're bassists, they play in hotels, salsa, funk, popular music, jazz. They're complete musicians, so they understand. The people who've had this problem with me are people who are folcloristas. And in particular, it's not even the folcloristas who were born in this, like the whole family from Piñones, Loíza, or Mayagüez, or Guayama, or Ponce, or lived the whole life in this. It's mostly people who have come to adopt the subculture of grievance and really hate it. When somebody else comes and says, si esto cualquier persona puede tocar este patrón. You say that, and it drives them crazy. But it's the truth. Anybody can try with una yuba, but not everybody can go into un rumbazo afro-cubano. And not only play it and survive the pattern. No, tócate el tumbador, tócate el 3-2, tócate el quinto. Not just basic patterns. Play como dicen, sentimiento manana, con clave, with such an ease of understanding the clave and gliding in the conversation between the 3 or 4 drums that are playing, that you notice the mastery. Difícil. Not everybody, para decir almost nobody. Almost nobody. Ahí es que tú ves los percusionistas de verdad, the master percussionists, que tienen más conocimiento. Almost nobody can play bata drumming. Eso es tremendamente difícil. When I started playing bata drumming, I was already a very accomplished, college graduated, jazz drumming professional who had been playing from 9 years of age. I came to bata drumming when I was 30 or 31. I already had a career because I started at 9 years of age of playing. I already had a career of playing popular music. I mean, 20 or 30 years. You know, they say that with 10 years of practice, you have mastered something. I already had 25. So I was definitely a professional musician of this. Bata drumming was something else. Hasta el día de hoy, I'm only halfway done with learning el oro seco because it is extremely difficult. If I'm having that much difficulty, and there's a lot of people haven't hacked it. I've heard story of people who've gone to jurar en el tambor and have stepped back. En el cuarto de iniciación han dicho, no, yo no voy para adelante. No. Se cagan. There's people que se cagan. There's people who say que se le ofreció jurarlo en añada. They go, no, that's not for me. No. They see bata drumming. They try to sit down one day at an auricular. You know, auricular means the non-consecrated drummers, which they consecrated drums which they can touch. They sat down, tocaron un toque. They were all off. They couldn't understand where the 1 was, or if it was supposed to play on the off, or if it was in the 3. And they said, mira, olvídate esto. Yo no puedo. There's a reason why you don't see this associated academia, subculture of grievance, LGBT, sexism, racism, Afro-identitarian activists showing up at bata gatherings or rumbazo. Because they can't hang there. Because they can't play it. Because they don't feel included there. Porque la gente en estos círculos de bata o de rumba, as just 2 examples of other folkloric traditions, are not there to participate in the subculture of grievances, like Jessica Krug. They're not there to reírle las mentiras o la sonrisa. They're not there to sobarte your grievance and to include your particular social grievance or trauma grievances that you have in a practice that is supposed to be, for example, in the case of bata playing, for worship of the orishas. Aquí estamos worshiping Changó, aquí estamos bajando a Yemayá, aquí estamos bajando a Batalá. If you're not in it here for that, saca tu cosa y vete, lárgate. We're not, tú no venimos a tocar, aquí yo no vengo a guapiar en los batás, tocando los batás, porque yo estoy enfogonado y quiero decir, yo soy René González y yo soy más negro que los negros y me siento negro puertorriqueño. I'm not here to express, número 1, cultural appropriation, ridiculousness. Pero también, mi papá me tocó y mi grandfather me tocó y I hate men. I'm not there for that. That's not the purpose of my participation there. Cuando yo estoy tocando jazz drumming, I'm not there, or for example, what's called general business gigs, GB gigs. I'm there to do a job. I'm not there to show off how good of a drummer I am. Al contrario, I'm there to show off how boring of a drummer I am. I'm there. That's what the song calls. That's what the song calls. When I'm at that circle, I'm for that. Cuando estoy en un rumbazo, eso es pa' guapiar. That's the place pa' guapiar. Ahí es que vamos a guapiar. This is for me to be, para sacar la masculinidad viril changoísta de que I'm here showing off. Para eso que todos los bailarines con su... That's the place for that. When I'm playing in a bata drumming, mira. Igual, tú sabes, es para tocar para los orillas. Aquí no está René, el hijo de Changó, guapeando y enseñando y batallando y hablando de política. Aquí yo estoy hablando de los orillas. All that stays outside. And I think that doesn't exist in los bombazos precisely because there's been a lot of openness from a lot of people who play bomba to allow other people who are alien to the culture, who don't know the culture, who are not about the culture, como dice mucha gente por en la calle, to include all this subculture of grievance, all this caca that comes from the outside. Because it is caca. Not everything that is studied and intellectualized is something de mucho valor. There's a lot of people who take their grievances, use a lot of academese language, create a lot of essays and books about it, run on the reputation of having written a lot of books about academese caca, and then go to bombazos to express how they are so negra as a way to be able to get street cred for their caca. And that's Jessica Krug. Jessica Krug was a white woman who successfully infiltrated Bombazo culture or Bombazo places precisely because there was a space, there was a vulnerability in the Bombazos for the subculture of grievances de que me tocaron, de que they hate me because I'm gay, de que hate me because I'm a woman, de que hate me because I'm negra, de que I'm indigenous, Afro-Puerto Rican, and they look like me. They look like me. I'm indigenous and Afro-Puerto Rican only. I reject all my European DNA, even though that's ridiculous. Miscegenation makes it impossible. Hay mucha caca. And there's no other way to say it. See, these videos, I always start trying to be as intellectual as possible so that people can get where I'm coming from. And I always end up calle, al fin y al cabo. Because no puedo mentir. Como dice Shakespeare, to thine own self be true. Yo no me puedo mentir a mí mismo. Esto es caca asociada. And the reason that they gravitate that is because there's a lot of permissiveness to it. And it's very easy to play these patterns. Y al que le moleste, el que le moleste. Y hay un montón de personas que tocan bomba. Yo conozco gente que son master bomba dancers, master bomba players, que también tocan batá. No vamos a nombrar nombres, pero he knows what I'm talking about. Que también te tocan batá, que también te tocan rumba afrocubana. And when we have conversations in private where they feel like, I'm not going to get burned, because nobody wants to have a lot of people don't have the courage to say what I'm saying. But they'll say it in private en un club. Sí, claro, esto es mucho más difícil tocarlo que la bomba. But they won't say that en un bombazo porque you get la muchachita gordita bailarinas mirándote mal, the new little students, these new little light-skinned, intellectualized UPR, I just discovered soy negra for the first time in my life, con su trajecito, mira. Did he just say bomba is not that hard? How dare him? And that happens. That culture happens. Not to thine own self be true. Esa cultura pasa. Pero hay un montón de percusionistas who are multi-percussionists, who are vastly trained, excellent musicians, de los mejores en Puerto Rico. No quiero nombrar nombres, but I'm talking about the heads of groups. I'm talking about the ones that head the best rumba groups, que te dicen en privado. Sí, la rumba es mucho más difícil. Sí, mano, tocar un Mozambique es más difícil. Playing a Mozambique is harder. Yeah. Playing rumba is harder. Yeah, matá is playing way harder. Playing Latin jazz with 4 congas at the same time, a pattern de Giovanni Hidalgo. That's a lot harder than, or even worse. That was a yuba, or it is what it is, aunque se me enfogone la verdad. So, I had to get it out of my system because I saw the Jessica Krug story and I'm like, será madre de los bombazos, man. I knew that shit was going to happen. And they're not the only one. I'm pretty sure that under the story, if people are honest to themselves, they can say, yeah, I've seen other Jessica Krug types. And they're not all white Jewish women. There's also a lot of Latinos, even people who are Afro-Puerto Ricans, who have absolutely no identification with bomba porque ellos no lo participan. But they just have Afro-Puerto Rican skin, and they go, yo esto es mío. ¿Qué tú has hecho para la bomba? ¿Con quién tú has tocado? When have you practiced? How many bombazos have you been to ganarte el crédito to be able to say, no, yo soy bombero? I've been to, in my lifetime, probably 50 or 60 bombazos in my lifetime with top bombero players. I don't even go, yo soy un bombero, yo soy un folclorista. Because I have enough respect for the people who dedicate their life to nothing but la bomba. Esa gente, yo no tengo problema with them. I have a problem with this associated crud of social grievance and subculture of grievance, people from academia who come in to bring all the other crap into bomba that has nothing to do with it. Y punto. Te lo tenía que sacar mi sistema porque I'm honest. I'm honest. I'm honest. Tenía que decirlo. Cuídense. Bye-bye. Jessica Krug is a fraud, and it happened because you guys are too permissive.